The Power Workers Union is the union of choice. Those words identify the current goal of the Power Workers Union and where it wants to be seen in the eyes of the public in the future. How do you achieve this goal? How do you attract new members from a community full of aspiring young people and build powerful leadership from within? Well, you start with some pretty lofty goals, goals made by people who are committed to providing its members with a consciousness of respect, solidarity, democracy, and pride. The Power Workers Union has the right stuff when it comes to being proactive and progressive. The Power Workers Union is continuously teaching and learning on every level within the organization's developing strategic plan. There is an openness and honesty in how the union communicates with its members and where it stands in the community. This membership strives for consensus by involving appropriate people and recognizing the democratic decision-making process. It took a lot of perseverance and dedication by many individuals to evolve the union to where it stands today. There are many historical issues and events that led to the formation of the body now known as the Power Workers Union. It has been a long and fruitful road, and Keely Cummings remembers it well.
My major responsibility, of course, was to make sure we had a good collective agreement and to make sure it was properly implemented and policed. Trade unionism actually evolved during this period, where previously Hydro employees were very, very self-centered as far as their work and job was concerned. They expanded to understanding that their responsibilities and their concerns were not much different than other workers throughout the labor movement as a whole. We had to expand our horizons and look at problems in a much broader way in comparing ourselves to other workers out in the community. In the early 40s and into the 50s, the Ontario Hydro had to establish a number of colonies across the province. And these were small communities built around their generating facilities. They had to be established because there was no facilities in their towns in the area. They provided lovely services to the people that were living there, although remote in many respects, and they were great places to live. My wife and I were provided with a small two-room shack, really, and the interrelationship between us and the other Hydro employees, although at times very tenseful, also was quite enjoyable. In the early 1950s, because of the quickly expanding construction projects going across the province and the Hydro dealing with 19 independent craft unions, they established an allied council where they could sit down at one bargaining table and settle all the issues as far as bargaining is concerned, rather than dealing with them independently. During the period of 1955 to 1963, the Ontario Hydro Employees Union, the OHEU, were under raid a number of times by other trade unions. The International Union of Operating Engineers, the Canadian Union of Operating Engineers, and the IBEW being a number of the major unions that were raiding us or endeavoring to raid us during that time. This created a great deal of strain between ourselves and the other unions, and resulted, by the way, in a great deal of wasted effort on everyone's part. The disruption amounted to a lot of people who still were company union minded, who felt that they shouldn't be part of the labor movement. It meant, by the way, that we had to continue a number of meetings with the membership to continue to convince them that they should be part of the family. It really meant, as I stated, 3 referendums before we finally convinced a large enough proportion that we felt that we would stay within the family. After the CLC was established, there were 2 major public sector unions, the National Union of Public Service Employees that we belonged to, and the National Union of Public Employees. They were both within the CLC, and they conducted merger meetings. I was part of the merger committee. The merger meetings were held between 1958 and 1963, and the merger, which brought about CUPE, the Canadian Union of Public Employees, took place in September of 1963. It's difficult to actually look over the period of time that I was involved in the union to try to determine what was my most enjoyable time. But if I was pressed to select one, I guess it would be the strike of 1969. We carried on a 7-week rotating strike. Actually, we won every issue Every issue that was in dispute at that time, we won, and when the strike was settled, everyone was totally happy.
In the early 1970s, management dug in for a long set of negotiations which they calculated would end in an unsuccessful strike. Demands on both sides were high. With all the conciliation and mediation, there was still no resolution. On June 25, 1972, the first members walked out. Management responded by locking out the workers, triggering the first province-wide strike in hydro history. The strike lasted for 122 days. It had a huge impact on the union. Jack McDonald.
My role during my elected period as president was kind of twofold. First of all, we had to look after the administration of the union and the union office, and then we had to look after the membership. In looking after the members, we had to look after the day-to-day administration of the members, such as job evaluation, grievance procedure, and so on, and ultimately in negotiating them a collective agreement that was acceptable to them. Trade unionism meant to me, as president, it meant the gathering of the workforce into a group that could best negotiate a good collective agreement for themselves. The strike of 1972 made the union, in my opinion. We suffered a great deal. We were facing odds at the bargaining table, but nonetheless our members voted to reject the contract, and as a result we were out in strike for 4 months. The organization lost all of its finances. The members suffered 4 months with no wages, and at the end they continued to vote for the contract the way they originally voted for it in the rejection. I think it made the union for the future, and as it was proven later, the next contract was perhaps the best contract we ever negotiated. The contracting out issue was a major issue for us because we believed that what management was trying to do is to weaken the union by contracting out a lot of our jobs and demoralizing our membership. It was very, very important, and as a result of that, our members were smart enough to realize the contracting out was their bread and butter for the future. There's no point in having a pension plan if your job is going to disappear down the road. You have to have secure employment in order to reap the benefits of a pension plan in the future, so it meant a great deal to us. The union's position on the pension plan was that Ontario Hydro should contribute their fixed contribution according to the value that was set by the actuary for the fee of that year. In other words, they analyze the plan each year and they determine what the cost is. Hydro should be paying that cost. Now, what we found out in 1986 was that Ontario Hydro had been denying their full contributions over a number of years, hit and miss over the years. And we finally started to get that together, and we realized that they were using the pension plan money to replace their own contributions. As a result of this, we went through a grievance, and ultimately we had to go to the court. We went through the Ontario court system, and then ultimately we went through the federal Supreme Court of Canada. In a nutshell, at the end, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that Ontario Hydro had violated the Act and that they should have been making their contributions according to the cost each and every year. And in the end, they were somewhere around $700 million in the hole. As a result of this, Hydro was then forced to pay that money back into the pension plan. And I might add, the real coup de grace, as far as I was concerned, is the judges said, and how much did this legal fee cost the union? I said, $400,000. They said, and Hydro will pay that as well. What was happening prior to the LTD plan coming into existence was if somebody was ill or was injured on the job, not on the job, but injured on their own time, they would exhaust their sick leave, and having no more sick leave, they could be terminated. The LTD plan took over and covered them in wages from there on until they were recovered physically and able to come back to work. So it was a great plan, and I think it was a good tool for Ontario Hydro too. I think my most rewarding moment in the whole process of collective bargaining was our win in the pension plan. Ontario Hydro had literally been cheating the membership for years and years and years, and weren't even upfront and honest about it. When we won that money back, that enabled the union to go to the bargaining table and negotiate a fair collective agreement, and that, along with them paying our legal fees, kind of made my day, because there were a lot of people in the union movement and a lot of people in our membership that thought we didn't have a snowball's hope in hell of winning, but we did.
The Power Workers Union is continuously engaged in maintaining its position of bargaining strength for its members. Operating world-class utilities and providing the best quality service for the consumer puts tremendous responsibility into the hands of members. So how do you move forward? How do you protect collective goals and concerns? Future survival depends on today's decisions concerning the training of new members, moving forward with a progressive strategic plan, and acknowledging vital issues that could harm development and growth. Current President Don McKinnon.
In 1985 at Ontario Hydro, we had roughly a 2-week strike on the issue of contracting out. Work that we felt should be performed by regular members was being contracted out to non-union contractors. We felt this was a violation of the collective agreement. We ended up in a strike over it. By the time we rolled around to 1992 bargaining, the temporary measures that had been put in place after the 85 strike by arbitrator Burkett were not serving the purpose. Although there was percentages that determined how much work regular members would do, it wasn't sufficient in our view. Our jurisdiction was still being eroded, and we felt we were headed for another confrontation with the employer unless we could find a way to offset that particular issue. The parties, through a facilitated process, negotiated the purchase service agreement, which gave us the right to choose and decide with the employer when work could and would be contracted out. It's been a tremendous security provision for the work of the PWU members over the years, and the agreement itself has been heralded as almost an international accomplishment in terms of union management relations. The accords were negotiated in the early 1990s after it became apparent to the Power Workers Union through some labor board activity by the building trades unions that we didn't have jurisdiction over work at Ontario Hydro. We thought we, in fact, did have jurisdiction over work, but found that our scope clauses gave us jurisdiction over people, but not the work itself. What we found was work that we'd traditionally done in the past, in fact, belonged to other unions through their scope clauses. In an endeavor to try and recreate what historically had been the division of work, the unions were able to sit down with the use of a mediator and negotiate the two accords that enshrined the rights of the parties to do work at Ontario Hydro. When the Conservatives were elected into power in the mid-90s, it was a concern of the PWU that they intended to sell the wires company, for example, and Ontario Hydro lock, stock, and barrel. That was of great concern to us, given that there was no effective regulation in place to prevent gaming with transmission supply, generation supply, that the wires company would be broken up, etc. What was achieved for the members out there was a recognition that the PWU could be effective in terms of lobbying politicians, that it could be effective in issues where commissions or groups were looking at what effective changes might happen within the industry. Ultimately, we prevented the dismantling of the distribution company. The power workers had input into the Electricity Act in the sense that we had made extensive lobbying efforts about the whole issue of the breakup of Ontario Hydro. Our efforts, I believe, ensured that proper regulation was in place for the new industry that was unfolding as a result of the Act. After several years of purchase service agreement protection for power workers' jurisdiction over their jobs, it became apparent that we needed another mechanism, a more effective means of protecting our rights to work at the jobs at Ontario Hydro and successor companies. What we did was we negotiated a hiring hall agreement, style agreement with Hydro One initially, and in the scope clause of that agreement, carved out jurisdiction for work. So as a result, in addition to the purchase service agreement, we now had a casual workforce that would be employed after regulars were unavailable to do the work, and thereby protecting the regular workforce and making it much easier for us to determine where regular jobs existed in the future. These agreements continue to be extremely important in terms of providing security for long-term regular jobs and creating opportunities for people to work on a casual basis. The Electricity Transition Committee is a stakeholder committee. It's chaired by the Minister of Energy and is made up of participants from around the province representing business, large electricity users, mines, municipal utilities, Hydro One, Ontario Power Generation are represented there, the IMO, as well as myself as a lone labor representative. Our participation in the Electricity Transition Committee has given us a bird's eye view of the intricate details involved in restructuring the industry. Our first experience with the privatization of generators in the province was with Bruce Power. It's been extremely beneficial for the members at Bruce, the community, and the company, as well as the long-term supply of clean, safe electrical power in the province. Continuous development is essential to a successful union. Members need to understand what the issues are that they face locally and that the organization faces on a larger scale. We need to find ways of connecting the union leadership to the union activists in the work locations as well as the members, and ensuring that there's a flow both ways from the shop floor to the executive and back again with regards to issues, information, and so on. In 1990, we were able to negotiate the unilateral right for health and safety representatives at Ontario Hydro to stop work. It was unprecedented. It was the first time in the labor movement anywhere that union representatives have given the right to stop work on behalf of other workers, and we enshrined that in our collective agreement. It was an extremely memorable moment for me and a great day for the union.
The Power Workers Union is proud of its past and proud of its numerous accomplishments. It has survived many crises only to become stronger and more unified than ever. It is evolving from the vision of its founders to a new course for the future. The union is opening up its membership to working men and women outside Ontario Hydro as a means of ensuring growth and survival. It embraces the talents and recognizes the value in training new, young members as it surges forward as a powerful player in Ontario's public life. This union, more than any other, celebrates its members by honoring a democratic process that guarantees members have the responsibility for deciding the kind of work conditions they will accept. Whatever challenges the future may hold, one quality that can ensure that the union survives and grows is the same quality that has carried it this far: solidarity. Solidarity and democracy have walked hand in hand for over 50 years. This is the union's past. It is also its future.